Good afternoon and good evening to ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. My name is Bening Sukumagati and I will be the master of ceremony for the event. My name is Bening Sukumagati and I will be the master of ceremony for the event. We are RWYC Indonesia for and on behalf of RWYC Asia and RWYC International, also supported by Chakra Cultural Foundation and UNESCO Chair on Global Understanding for Sustainability, Friedrich Schiller University, Germany presents RWYC's second international seminar with the focus subject is Culture, Key to Systemic Change and Sustainable Development. This seminar is a seminar to examine the crucial role of culture in creating systemic change and sustainable development that are required to chart a new course for humanity and the world in the future. The seminar consists of the 6 panelists. Each panelist will make a presentation regarding the focus framework of subject of this seminar. The public question and answer section will be carried out after all panelists finish their presentations. Please write your questions on the chat room during or after discussion. Before we start the seminar, let me introduce to all of you our moderators and all the panelists. Number 1 is D. Paul Schaffer from Canada. Hello, sir. And then number 2 is Professor Thomas Legrand from France.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you.
Hello, Professor Thomas. Happy to see you here. Number 3 is Professor Ben Overland from Germany.
Hello to everybody.
Hello, Professor. Number 4 is Professor Rana P.B. Singh from India. Hello, Professor. Number 5 is Dr. Fabiola Colmenero from Mexico.
Hello, Fabiola.
Hello, Fabiola. Number 6 is Professor Fatima Zahra Salih from Morocco.
Hello.
Hello, Fatima.
Hello.
And our moderators are...
I'm here. Hola.
Hi, Fatima.
Hola. Okay.
Okay, and our moderators are Professor Olympia Niglio from Italy.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hello, Olympia. And number 2 is Dr. Mira Sartika from Indonesia.
Hello, everyone. Nice to have you
Hello,
all here
Mira.
tonight.
Hola, Mira.
Hola.
Okay, right now I handed down the seminar to our moderator, Professor Olympia Niglio, to conduct this RWYC second international seminar. Please, Professor, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, Bening. Thank you. Good morning, good evening to everyone. It is a great pleasure to introduce this important international seminar on the culture promoted by our National Committee Reconnecting with Your Culture, Indonesia. As you know, this year, UNESCO celebrates the second international conference on the cultural policies that will take place in Mexico City next September. This year, the Mexico Declaration on the Cultural Policies celebrates 14 years, and this is an important occasion to share new vision to approach the next challenges. But today, we celebrate the International Day on Monument and Site. Indeed, every year on 18 April, ICOMOS, these special days that was approved by UNESCO in 1983. However, this celebration, but above all, the complex historical situation that is affecting all the world, allows us to reflect on the significance that culture plays in our life, and like the culture helps us to build a better society. Culture is our life, and today we must speak of culture as encounter. Speaking of a culture of encounters means that we as a people should be passionate about meeting others, seeking point of contact, building bridges, planning a project that includes everyone. This becomes an inspiration and a style of life. The subject of this culture is the people, not simple one part of society that would pacificate the rest with the help of professional and media resources. The Mexico Declaration on the Article 10 affirms culture defines a fundamental dimension of the development process and help to strengthen the independence, sovereignty, and identity of the nation. Growth has frequently been concerned in quantitative terms without taking into account its necessary qualitative dimension, namely the satisfaction of man's spiritual and cultural aspiration. The aim of genuine development is the continuing we will begin and fulfillment of each and every individual. Now, together, we must work to involve the local community to enhance the cultural heritage, because every culture represents a unique and irreplaceable body of values that we need to know very well and share to build new bridge in dialogue with the other culture. These important topics will be analyzed and discussed with our distinguished panelists that we thank very much for this extraordinary opportunity. Now we wish you a nice seminar, and I invite Dr. Mira Sartika, present our first panelist. Thank you so much. Enjoy this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Olympia. I will start. Let me start the seminar with the first panelist. I'm so excited to hear all the panelists in here and learn from them all. The first panelist from Deepo Sever from Canada. His presentation entitled From the Economic Age to a Cultural Age. But prior to that presentation, let me read the profile of our prominent first panelist. Deepo Sever has worked in the cultural field for more than 50 years as an author, advisor, educator, and administrator. He was Assistant Director of the Ontario Arts Council from 1967 to 1970, taught arts administration and culture policy at York University and the University of Toronto, has undertaken many projects and missions for UNESCO, and is founder and director of the World Culture Project at present. He has written many books on art, culture, and cultures. And the last book is the most interesting, is The World as Culture, Cultivation of the Soul to the Cosmic Whole, 2022. Welcome to Paul D. Sever. Please, sir, you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mira, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be in attendance at this conference and also to make a formal presentation on it. I'm going to be talking about, in the period of time that I have, about what I think are two of the greatest challenges confronting the world and humanity at the present time. The first, in my view, is moving out of the present economic age. The second is moving into another kind of age, which I believe should be a cultural age. I think if we can understand and admit what's happened in the last 250 years, where we're positioned in the world today, and where we need to be positioned in the world of the future, it will be possible to achieve a great deal through what I believe could be a revolution, a renaissance. However, if we're not able to do this, in my mind, we're going to be facing a revolution, and it's going to be a very difficult and serious revolution, perhaps greater than we've ever experienced in the past. I've written at length about this subject in a book called Revolution or Renaissance, Making the Transition from an Economic Age to a cultural age. If I could now have the second slide, I'd appreciate it very much. I'd like to talk a bit at the present time now about the nature and character of the economic age and how it developed. This, as we know, has had a long history. The economic age, in my view, really started with Adam Smith and the publication of his Wealth of Nations in 1776. And he was the first person, I think, to talk about the centrality of economics in the world. He was particularly concerned about every individual specializing in a particular production function, because he believed that this could create the most goods and services and material and monetary wealth in the world. He divided all labor up into two basic classes, one in which he called productive labor, and he called it productive labor because it produced material and concrete goods and services and material wealth. On the other hand, he talked about unproductive labor as labor that didn't result in the production of and distribution and consumption of material commodities, but rather mostly services. And the people that were working in those areas were largely unproductive in their work because they didn't produce material products. This started to evolve in the world into dividing all economic activities that people were engaged in into an economic base and a non-economic superstructure, where the base was considered to be the basics in life, the things that were really important, and the things that weren't so important were come to be deemed the frills. What really, in my view, strengthened the development of this economic age that was started by Adam Smith was another famous economist and also political scholar and historian, Karl Marx. Karl Marx, as you know, created the economic interpretation of history, which I think is a very crucial problem, not only in the past, but also at the present and going forward into the future. He created what he saw, as you can see from the diagram, on the economic base, which included all the material activities envisioned by Adam Smith, and the non-economic superstructure, which included artistic, scientific, social, educational, political, recreation, and spiritual activities. Since going back a century and a half, most of those activities were not cultural industries as we know them today, but rather individual activities and services that were provided to people. So this was the structure of the economic age and the economic model of development. And what's happened over the last 150 years since Marx is that this has increasingly been strengthened and globalized throughout the world. So we're now living in an economic age, and it's an economic age that not only stretches for the Western world, but to all parts of the world and all the various activities in society. What made Marx's economic interpretation of history so intensified and strengthened was this idea that there was a one-way, largely one-way, relationship between the economic base and the economic superstructure. So the command really by Marx was put all your energy and effort into increasing the economic base, and this will produce an economic surplus that will allow developments in the superstructure. Now, we've all been living in this economic age over the course of our lives. It started, of course, much sooner than this, and it's produced phenomenal benefits in the world. No one could deny this. Billions of people since the economic age was started by Adam Smith have had their standards and quality of life increase substantially as a result of this commitment to placing the highest priority on economics, economies, and economic growth. In addition to this, we've had enormous improvements and advances in what's called the superstructure in artistic, scientific, social, educational activities. So I believe that this is the most important human achievement that ever has been realized in the world. And we tend to take this for granted now, but it is really quite phenomenal. But the problem with this is that with the strengths and benefits of the economic age, we also get shortcomings. And until very recently, these shortcomings were ignored. And let me state what some of the most important shortcomings of the economic age are. The first is that there's no contextual framework within which the economic base is situated. It's a standalone age in the sense that no consideration really was given to the natural environment when the economic base, when the economic age was started, and as it developed and over the last 200 years until very, very recently with the environmental movement. In addition to this, there's a built-in bias in my view, and it's handled at great length in the book on Revolution or Renaissance, that the economic age produces very unequal distributions of income and wealth. And this has surely been indicated by over the last 250 years, where we have seen increasingly that the economic age has produced goods, services, and material and monetary wealth, but most of that material and monetary wealth is now tied up in the hands of a very few people. And we've all seen the protests that have occurred in recent years as a result of that. There's one other problem that I'd like to mention with the economic age before I go on to the cultural age. And that is that after Smith and Marx and the economic interpretation of history, unconsciously, the economics and the economic age came to be considered as the whole, not a part of the whole, a very crucial part of the whole, but as the whole. And as a result of that, living in an economic age as we do today, we have been reducing everything to economics and giving everything an economic value. And things that don't have an economic value, we consider to be frills or part of the superstructure of society and less relevant in the overall scheme of things. This is what has to change in the future. So what has happened as a result of this is that everybody is now talking about the need for systemic change. We've been prepared to admit over the last decade or so that piecemeal or incremental change is no longer possible to solve the problems that exist in the world today. We need systemic change. Now, where's the base, the origins of the idea of systemic change? I would argue that the origins are in the work of anthropologists in the 19th, latter part of the 19th and early part of the 20th century, and particularly when Edward Burnett Tyler defined culture formally as the complex whole or the total way of life of people. He didn't say economics, which was very powerful at that time, was the whole. He said that culture is the whole. And this was based on looking at all activities in society and not just some activities in society, because the underlying definition of anthropology was that it was looking at human beings and human societies as a whole. Unfortunately, there was much to be learned, but we didn't learn it at that time because the world was totally preoccupied with the theories and ideas and practices of economists. So the idea that culture was the whole didn't manifest it much far beyond the anthropology and perhaps sociology as disciplines. It remained impacted in there, although anthropologists and sociologists started to talk about it a great deal. Okay, I will go over the developments that have taken place since that time very quickly, and then get on to the cultural age. This idea of culture as the whole or the total way of life was revisited by the delegates at the Mexico City Conference on World Cultural Policies, organized by UNESCO and the United Nations in 1982. And at that conference, the delegates unanimously endorsed the idea that there was a second formal understanding of culture. It wasn't just the arts, humanities, and heritage of history. It was the complex whole or the total way of life of people. So this was the beginning of recognizing this second definition, this holistic definition of culture more broadly in the world. Following that, if you want, it's very interesting to trace how culture is now being considered a change agent today. Following that, this was followed upon by, if you want to read the writings of Edgar Schein, for example, who wrote a great deal about organizational culture. And this set in motion a huge development that took place at the end of the 19th century and beginning, or not 20th century and beginning of the 21st century, when a lot of people were writing about organizational culture. Then in 2014, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary people, claimed that culture was the word for the world in that year, 2014. Most recently, then, what we've had is a tremendous amount of discussion going on in different parts of the world about the role that culture can play as a change agent in the world. Change the culture is what we're hearing in more and more organizations, institutions, governments, educational institutions, hospitals, and so on. And this brings me then to my third diagram, which is the cultural age and the cultural model of development. As you can see in this diagram, the large circle in the center of the box is culture as a whole. And we've demonstrated within that it includes all of the activities in a society or a culture or a community or a country. Arts, science, economics, politics, technology, and so on. And the arrows are intended to go in both directions rather than one, as they went in the Marxian model of economics, because there's a complex interchange going on all the time between all those different forces. Now, you could make the argument that economics is more predominant in that circle than some of the others, but some of the others are growing very rapidly now in importance. Technology, for example, has come into prominence much more strongly. So has science. But the point of culture as a whole, when looked at from a holistic point of view, is that every activity is rooted in culture. And that's why I've talked about these various areas as economic culture, social culture, artistic culture, and so on. So culture in this sense is the context within which all these different activities are located. But it doesn't end there. And this is the big difference between the economic age and the economic model of development and the cultural age and cultural model of development. Culture itself in general, and cultures in particular, are context in a much larger setting. And that setting, as you can see by the outside rim and the box, is the natural, historical, and global environment. And you can see also that there are interacting arrows between culture as a whole and cultural as context in the diagram, and the natural, historical, and global environment. We know these things are going on all the time. We're having all these discussions now about the interaction between culture and the natural environment in this holistic sense. But we're also having great discussions now about the relationship between the historical environment and culture as a whole, our past, the things we inherit from the past, and so on with the global environment, and now increasingly with the cosmic environment added onto this. To sort of bring this then to a conclusion, I think a great deal could be achieved if we move out of the economic age and into a cultural age. It's very important during this age to ensure that all cultures and countries are situated effectively in the natural and historical environment. It's very essential because this is obviously the key to our historical baggage, as well as creating more effective relationships with the natural environment and reducing the devastation of the natural environment. It's so obvious and now in the economic age. It's also important to realize that within the circle, one of the most important things that we have to focus on is the harmonization of the relationships between all those different areas of culture. What is the relationship between the educational culture and the artistic culture, the humanistic culture, and on it goes? I also believe, because this portrait, this diagram, unlike the economic diagram, is concerned not only with culture as a whole, but as we said earlier, culture is a total way of life of people. So we focus on that. We learn that what systemic change is all about going forward in the future is creating the new lifestyles, the new methodologies, the new ways of life, the new ways of thinking about life that are so important in the future and consistent with the world's present problems today. I think we can also build together new ideals, new goals, new objectives for culture and cultures and cultural development and policies through using a model like this. So in conclusion, I would like to suggest, if I could, if I may, I guess is the proper word in English, that the cultural communities in the world, broadly defined, not only to include people in the arts, humanities, heritage of history, but also now in anthropology, sociology, biology, ecology, cosmology, that if somehow we could bring all these people together that are working on various aspects of culture and understanding what culture in this bigger sense is all about, if we could start to bring all these people together, and this community, I believe, can play a leadership role and a proactive role in bringing a cultural age into existence in the future and making it flourish. Thank you very much for providing me with the time to talk about the transition that might be possible from an economic age to a cultural age. And I look forward to the presentations of the other outstanding speakers and opportunities to discuss their and my comments after this.
Thank you for your presentation. It is such an interesting presentation about the shifting from economic age to the cultural age, and it's a must. So, if a little conclusion that economic age is not really as a whole, is it correct? The culture is a whole of everything.
Economics is a crucial part, and cultural is the whole.
Yes,
That's
correct. That's the highlight of your presentation. I think we should remember that the economic is crucial, but not a whole. But the culture is the whole. The spiritual, including economic, I think.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yes.
It's not a rejection or a denigration of economics. It's saying we can no longer make economies and economic growth the highest priority in the world. It's always going to be a rather high priority, but no longer the highest priority. Yes, thank you.
Correct. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Such incredible. And let's continue to our second panelist, and I will call Professor Ben Overland. Hello, Professor.
Hello.
It's nice to have you again in here. Hello, Professor. How are you? We continue with the second presentation from Professor Ben Overland from Germany. His presentation will be Cultural and Regional Dimension of Global Sustainability. Wow, such incredible title. But prior to that, I will read a short profile of the Professor Ben Overland. Professor Ben Overland holds the UNESCO Chair on Global Understanding for Sustainability at the Friedrich Schiller University, Jena. He is a Fellow of the World Academy of Art and Sciences and Max Weber Center for Cultural and Social Studies, member of Academia Europaea, the founder and executive director at the International Year of Global Understanding, approved by the General Conference of UNESCO and proclaimed by the three major science councils of the human, social, and natural sciences. I think a lot of it. And he was honored by the International Geographical Union with the Laureate honor for his lifelong contribution to geographical science as a distinguished world-known scholar. Most recently, this is very interesting, he is the initiator and chair of the Jena Declaration on the Cultural and Regional Dimension of Global Sustainability. Please welcome Professor Ben Overland from Germany. The stage is yours, sir. Please start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mira, for your kind introduction. Yeah, it's a very big pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you as a panelist of the second international seminar on your network on culture, key to systemic change and sustainable development. I will talk very much along the lines that has just been developed by Paul, and I agree on everything he said. So there is some repetition perhaps, but I'm focusing more from that position to a kind of a critique to the current sustainability policies driven by the UN and most of the national governments. I think that claiming that culture is key for all sustainability issues may sound still strange to many people so far engaged in the field of sustainability. In fact, it's a quite challenging statement, but I would like to add it's also most important one. It is a challenging one because it's questioning the so far absolute predominance of the climate change topic, and on the one hand, and of the politically underlined natural scientific competence in sustainability issues on the other. It is the most important one because it is pointing to the need of a radical change of paradigm in sustainability policies, research, and education. This call for change is asking quite rightly for a prominent position of the cultural sphere, turning the so far dominant ways of doing things in sustainability from head to feet. I suggest to do this critique or this offering of an alternative in 4 steps. Mira, could you put please the PowerPoint?
Okay, please, Bram, slide-nya please, Robert.
Just the second one.
The second one, yang kedua. Okay.
Yes. So I'm talking about, first of all, what I see as the problems of the present strategies, then elaborate the reasons for the need for change. I will talk briefly about the leading principles of that alternative, the Jena Declaration, and its program lines before coming to some conclusions. So what goes wrong? Of course, there is a certain evidence for the dominant position of the natural sphere in comparison to the cultural. At first sight, we can experience it in the news on a daily basis. The challenges facing humanity today are not abstract. The confluence of various global crises, such as having an immediate and potential devastating impact on the daily lives of billions of people. The intensification of the frequency and magnitude of storms, floods, droughts, wildfires, etc., all over the world in the past few years are a pressing manifestation of this situation. 7 years ago, as it is well known, the United Nations agreed on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved in 2030. They shall enable to avert the looming drastic consequences of global climate change and other environmental issues that threaten our very existence. In this way, a secure, or at least safer, future for all should be made possible in the longer term. The implementation of this set of goals certainly includes an ambitious worldwide effort embedded in international agreements. However, the lack of coherence, scientifically not really convincing layout, makes a failure to achieve these self-imposed goals likely. And this despite considerable financial efforts. Given this lack of satisfactory progress, it has become fashionable to accuse responsible authorities, especially politicians. The most common reproach is the prioritization of economic growth targets over the necessary measures to combat climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and growing social injustice. From the rather comfortable position of those who criticize, observable undesirable developments are readily all blamed on leadership, policy, or systemic crisis. Even if individuals and bodies with great decision-making power bear special responsibility, it's not very convincing to pillory them all alone. This kind of criticism leaves the central problem untouched, in my view, for it remains committed to the same currently dominant idea that all political decisions should continue to be made from the top down. And it assumes that sustainability can be reached already by technological innovation, as well as an increase of financial resources. A large proportion of the measures taken to date against global climate change and environmental deterioration, as important as they are, cannot achieve the immediate effects that are actually required. It is striking that sustainability policy and research has so far focused primarily on technological solutions to problems. The current budget plan, for instance, of the European Union, sustainability policy, allocates an overwhelming majority of funds to environmental technology, only in comparatively small share to all other approaches such as education or civil society engagement. This widespread attitude is grounded in a shared, ecologically driven, naturalistic understanding of sustainability. This attitude leads to a primarily natural scientific study and management of physical conditions to solve environmental issues via technical innovations and methods. This approach is shared by politicians, a majority of citizens, most scientists, as well as even as critical NGO movements. That vision is too firmly established and ingrained to be changed easily. Alternative approaches are consequently often left out, policy advice on sustainability being usually addressed to the natural sciences and technology. In addition, it's also a fact so far that humanities and social sciences have at best been as only marginally engaged in this field, if at all. The result is a weak role of the cultural and social components in sustainability research and action. Instead of confidently developing a perspective of their own, the rather small number of engaged social scientists and humanities scholars are mostly content to carry the findings of the natural sciences to their expected social consequences into society. On the margins of that dominant view, there is a steadily growing recognition and demanding more and more of the same. Technological innovation, financial resources, and environmentally oriented solutions is not enough. And our network, of course, is one of the expression of this view. What is needed instead is a societal transformation in our ways of thinking, acting, and relating. And this implies a fundamental change in strategy. In short, it requires a radical shift of paradigm in sustainability policy. That is, a shift of focus from the top down to the bottom up strategy. Calling for a shift of paradigm, identifying its implications and designing ways of its implementing this is precisely the claim and aim of the Jena declarations. That brings me to the second step, the change of paradigm. In order to build a proper bottom-up approach, the Jena Declaration focuses directly on people's everyday practices, addressing them in a culturally respectful way. The bottom-up approach starts out from the premise that the key catalysts of any sustainable social change are the citizens around the planet with their everyday practices. As demonstrated by a recent crisis, not least the COVID-19 pandemic, local everyday practices and routines are the basis of global relationships. Or speaking more generally, all social and cultural reality are constituted and reproduced through everyday practices, which in turn either constricts or promote sustainable livelihoods, a perspective applied by the Jena Declaration. Everyday actions are never merely a purely individual matter. All practices are always shaped by social relations and cultural schemes of interpretation. That is, they are always socially embedded, geographically located, historically localized, and culturally shaped. Accordingly, comprehensive social change depends on the participation of as many citizens and groups of peoples as possible. The consistent inclusion of everyday worlds should make it possible to learn from one another and to share experiences globally via appropriate links. At the same time, regionally specific given natural conditions are to be taken into account. Above all, the shift in question calls for a development of strategies that encourages and support people to radically change their everyday actions. For this, societies should be included in their entire breadth and focus on the mobilizations of civic society. People of all ages and backgrounds are to be reached, involved and motivated to cooperate and to act purposefully in the spirit of global sustainability. Together with local and global partners, this process should set in motion a movement that is as broad as possible. It should also include a new understanding, a more cultural and society-oriented understanding of sustainability, encompassing the fostering of human security for all. That includes, for instance, the call for the strengthening solidarity, social justice, reconciliation, respect for cultural diversity, to mention some of the more important ones. According to the Jena Declaration, the speed and depth of societal transformation along these lines can only be improved if sustainability policies are not primarily focused on the institutional level, but rather goes directly to the key actors of change. Considered together, these points make it clear how urgent it is to change the focus from the currently dominant top-down to a bottom-up logic. This catalog of requirements, which consists the frame of action program of the Jena Declaration. The Jena Declaration wants to gather the highest possible number of signatories to put pressure on the leading sustainability agencies and bodies to reach the SDGs in time. That is to say, the Jena Declaration is not only making claims, it is also and foremost about taking responsibility to engage in and organize the implementation of those claims. It would be great if all the national partners and individual members of the global Reconnect with Your Culture network could sign the declaration, as some have already done. To sign the declaration would open for each partner and member of the network access to strong partners like the World Academy of Arts and Science, the Global Network of UNESCO Chairs, the Club of Rome, the UN Section for Human Security, the International Council for Humanities, and the like. This could strengthen your position in your national, regional, and local collaboration with its partners. Could you then please share the third slide?
Third slide, please.
Right. So, no, the previous one. The previous one. Okay, that one. No, the next one?
The next one.
Yes, this one. So you could do that by going to the link www.thejenadeclaration.org and go there to the section to sign, fill in your name and your address, and then you would be one of the supporters of the Jena Declaration. And one of the aims of the Jena Declaration, as I said, as many signatories as possible to urge leading agencies for change. Please allow me now to present briefly the declaration's leading key principles, my third step, leading principles. There are 7 leading principles or 7 cornerstones of the Jena Declaration to keep in mind for the implementation. The first one is a very simple one, but at the same time often forgotten. It is the insight that sustainability is about more than ecology and respectively more than simply managing ecosystems and the environment. Could you please pass then the next slide where all the principles are listed?
7 principles, yes.
Yes, exactly. So the first one is then sustainability is about more than ecology. Much of today's thinking about sustainability is still rooted in the idea that human and the natural sphere are somehow opposed, that nature is simply our environment. But the opposite is true. With our bodies, we are part of nature. And the way we understand, relate to, and transform nature depends on our cultural backgrounds. Therefore, sustainability is in fact about us as part of nature, guided by cultural schemes of interpretation. The second cornerstone is the idea that true change towards sustainability can only be achieved if people begin to change their everyday routines and practices. Sustainability is more than just a fashion. It is, in fact, a mindset, something that enables us to live sustainably. Or to make the link with Paul's presentation, we could even say that we need a culture of sustainability as a mindset that gives us the possibility to reach global sustainability. Here, especially the voice of the arts can make a powerful contribution in the form I just mentioned, establishing new ways of connecting with the world to find sustainable solutions for everyday problems in most diverse contexts. This idea leads directly to the third cornerstone. It is about the deficiencies of the top-down approaches. If you have ever bought a one-size-fits-all shirt, you may know that one size only rarely fits all. And this is also true for all the propositions made by international policies in respect of sustainability. We cannot only act in respect of the natural conditions and technical devices. Top-down approaches that prescribe solutions for everyone hardly succeed. Instead, we need to find solutions that fit the specific conditions in different contexts. Or more precisely, we need to empower people to develop such solutions themselves. As a direct consequence of this, we can say, as fourth principle, cultural and regional diversity shall be the starting point of any sustainability strategy. Everything people do is locally emplaced, historically situated, and culturally embedded. It is difficult to convince people to make their lives more sustainable if the proposition doesn't find even the slightest anchor in their everyday world and speaks to their social cultural background. So successful sustainability strategy must embrace cultural and regional differences. The fifth principle is about an additional role of the arts and humanistic and social research. As I have said before, the arts open up new horizons. They can design and advance a different world. Likewise, the social sciences and humanities help us to understand the social and cultural dimension of the current transformation and gets us away from first aid solutionism. The Vienna Declaration argues that arts and social and humanistic research are key for making living sustainably not only possible, but even enjoyed by everyone. The sixth cornerstone highlights that the true bottom-up strategy involves a change of our ways of producing and applying knowledge. Many sustainability policies try to teach and tell others how to do things properly. Correct. Without knowing their cultural context, without respecting their expertise. We are convinced that robust solutions must be developed together and that there is a great potential for collaborative co-production of knowledge in transdisciplinary way. The basis for this is mutual learning from each another. And finally, the seventh principle calls for civic engagement. Genuine bottom-up policies enable to use forces and creativity of concerned citizens of all generations, but especially of the young members of our global community. To make this engagement more effective, we developed a global platform to facilitate concerted action by people all around the world together, whether they are researcher, teacher, officials, or concerned citizens. These are, in a nutshell, the 7 principles of the Vienna Declaration. The Vienna Declaration is an invitation to make sustainable development happen at our own doorstep, to mobilize people around the planet, and to enable fruitful outcomes from their engagement. Just briefly to finish the 3 program lines, the next slide, please.
The next slide.
The 3 program lines. To reach these goals, we are concentrating at the moment at 3 program lines: arts, learning, and civil engagement. In brief, the arts. With this first line of action, we propose, as already mentioned, the development of a new aesthetic for dealing with the natural as well as the social world, and thus a focus on arts. Mindsets, daily routines, and habits depend very much on everyone's cultural background to apply schemes of interpretation. How we do things depends very much on the way, on what they signify to us, how we see the world, and especially our place in it. The arts in all their forms are crucial for expanding mindsets, providing new perspectives on how to see things and ways of living. To mobilize artists in all forms of expression, music, fine arts, photography, film, performance, creative writing, poetry, numerical art, architecture, culinary artists, etc., for deep social transformation is of core relevance. The second program line is learning. It actions on the learning of new ways of living and its teacher for that. Why teacher and learner? Because they are designed to share mutually what they know and learn with about 2 billion pupils and students around the world. It is those students who will make the decision about sustainability throughout the 21st century, and we need them all to know as much as possible and to care deeply about sustainability. And finally, the third program line, Civic Engagement. Civil society organizations are at the core of the Jena Declaration, and the expertise and commitment will be used in order to catalyze deep societal transformation towards sustainability. Especially, civil engagement shall help to use all the experiences, all the insights of local people about in their history and the present about their living conditions on site. Let me finish with some short concluding remarks. As described, an important prerequisite of achieving the goals of the declaration is to respect the cultural environment, societal and regional living conditions, and historical context of all people. Citizens should experience the change in lifestyle as a direct benefit, for example, for their own safety, health, and cultural development, but also for social inclusion and cohesion. In this way, the direct development of local communities and individuals worldwide is to be achieved. With so much coherence, Reconnect with Your Culture and the Jena Declaration are the perfect partners to support and strengthen each another. It would really be great if we could strengthen the connection and develop further our common work and our common goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you, Professor Benno. I think this is very interesting. Professor, starting with the culture as key to sustainable development, it's very, very difficult to understand that statement. Yes, correct, Professor? It's not easy. I heard about the culture as key to sustainable development since 2013 in the General Assembly, United Nations. Then until today, I hold the culture in the implementation, the report, and then there's still zero, as you said about that. Just I'm very exciting until I found Jena Declaration and Reconnecting with Your Culture. This is the true bottom-up strategy, I think. So congratulations to Jena Declaration and Professor Olympia with Reconnecting with Your Culture. This is the true implementation of culture as key in sustainable development for the people and bottom up. And I know we can do it together. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Professor Benno. And I highlighted one thing that you said about the fail is about the coherence of scientifically fail to embed the implementation of culture. It's correct. That's why it's correct.
I mean, what we can see is the strategy so far is a top-down based on international negotiations, and that leads to laws and so on. So it's with a lot of pressure to implement it, but people should discover the advantages and do it deliberately. So, and that for that we respect every cultural reality.
Yes, I think this is correct. Coherent scientifically must be built also to push culture as to embed it to sustainable development. I think that's my part. I try my best to put culture in the scientific way, and then I hope with everyone in here, and we can continue to collaborate and make something fruitful, and culture become key, and economic age shifting to the cultural age. Okay, thank you, Professor Benno, for your presentation.
Thank you.
It's such interesting presentation, and a lot of we can learn, but we have to continue with our next presentation. This is not less important. This is so important also. I will welcome to Professor Thomas Legrand from France. Yes, hello, Professor. His presentation will be Politics of Being and the Necessary Cultural Reconnection and Development. But prior to his presentation, I will read some short profile of his bio. Thomas Legrand is a wisdom seeker, social scientist, and sustainability practitioner. He is the author of Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm. 2022, holding a PhD in ecological economics and having studied international development, political science, and management. Thomas Legrand works in the field of sustainability for UN agencies, private companies, and NGOs. His focus in the forest conservation, climate change, sustainable finance, and leadership, emphasizing in particular the importance of the inner and cultural development for sustainability. He is currently the lead technical advisor for the UNDP Convent Conscious Food Systems Alliance. Welcome, Professor Thomas Legrand. Please, the stage is yours now.
My pleasure, Mira. Thank you. Thank you for everyone to allow us a space to discuss this important theme of culture as key to systemic change and sustainable development. I will build much on what Paul Schaffer and Professor Overland have said until now, and offer some perspective about what would be a new development paradigm that would emphasize cultural development to allow the flourishing of all individuals, and what this means in terms of what cultural development could mean in a very applied way, and why the reconnection with our culture, and even I would say with society, with culture's traditional wisdom, is very important to address the current challenges we are facing. So I will share my screen with a short presentation. Yeah, here it goes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You can see it.
So I will build on this book I've just launched, called Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm. So first, why do we need a cultural evolution? Well, I think this is more and more recognized, and it is stated in a recent Human Development Report from UNDP that says, nothing short of a wholesale shift in mindsets is needed to navigate the brave new world of the Anthropocene. So why is it so important at this moment? I would say that basically over the last, let's say, 2 centuries, humanity has developed to a great extent its power over nature. And this has spurred an important material development, which has made our world more and more complex. But at the same time, we didn't invest into our inner capacities to develop the wisdom that we need to manage this power. Another important document, the Earth Charter, 20 years ago, recognized also that we need a change of mind and heart. And that's why I would say this cultural evolution that we need, I believe, is of a spiritual nature. And I can explain what I mean by that in a very concrete way. Basically, as the Dalai Lama said, we are giving too much attention to the external material aspects of life while neglecting moral ethics and inner values. So each culture, operate with a number of answers to fundamental questions, about who we are, what we are here for, etc. That's what Charles Eisenstein called that stories, and say basically all cultures are run by dominant stories. And the Western story that has spurred with colonization and globalization around the world could be called, from this perspective, the story of separation, where and it is based on a set of values such as materialism, individualism, reductionism, anthropocentrism, and all of this creates a program, which we could say a development program for societies, which has been to master nature to fulfill our material needs. And this comes with a specific, understanding of human beings as a little bit like the Homo economicus, to refer to the economic age where we are, where individuals are supposed to really be there to maximize their material self-interest. And this translates also in a development paradigm that emphasizes economic development. And I believe we are moving to a new story that Eisenstein called the story of interbeing, which, and it is backed, these stories are backed, of course, by, beliefs based on science. And science is more and more telling us that our individual flourishing is based on, to a great extent, on the connection we can develop with ourselves, with each other, and with nature. And these all come, and individual human flourishing is inherently linked to the flourishing of the whole Earth family. So, and one, we are facing, what we are facing now is a meta crisis, or our social systems seems to no longer work. And I would say this is an evolutionary cultural crisis, because, this way of operating based on the story of separation is no longer working. And that's why we are, as Harari said, we are on the threshold of hell. It really becomes increasingly destroying, destructive in nature. But at the same time, a new cultural paradigm, a new story wants to emerge, and that could bring a very positive outcome. And that's why also Harari said we are at the same time at the threshold of both heaven and hell. Okay, so I bring this reflection in terms also, so we need to reorient, we need a new development paradigm. We need to, as a practitioner in the field of sustainability, I've come to the conclusion that what we need is a really profound reorientation of what our societies, call progress and what they want to develop. And basically from economic growth, or having, towards being, and for humans, I would say human flourishing. So a more sustainable, qualitative, human, integral development. So there is a lot of people advocate for all these things, but I think behind that is this fundamental reorientations. And this is coherent with the cultural evolution observed, at least in rich countries over the last decades, according to Engelhardt, which is manage the global value surveys. So from materialism to post-materialism, and more fundamentally from survival to self-expression. And that's why also the Earth Charter says that when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not having more. So that's what I call the politics of being, aims at aligning our institutions with our true reason, I believe, to be here on Earth, which is becoming who we are, the best and most complete version of ourselves. So basically putting being as our main collective goal, and means, because you cannot separate the goal and the means. And by being, I mean all beings, not only human beings. And there are two main signs to being, I would say. One is to becoming who we are, or truest being. So that societies are organized to allow people to fulfill their healthy aspiration, but also to our highest being, also to develop the virtues and qualities which we have, because of this economic age, we have no longer emphasized, and that create this human ethical crisis we're in at the moment. So the politics of being is a wisdom-based approach that say, it should be about being, but also informed by science. And when I was trying to identify where this kind of new development paradigm is emerging through very different forms and different vocabularies, words, I was able to find that it is emerging in some scientific fields, but that have also some practical implementation in the political field. So, for example, talking the systemic and complex thinking, the people also who study how life works and how we should adapt, or society should be organized to function as nature works. Happiness, Bhutan has proposed a gross national happiness to be a new development paradigm. Love or empathy and compassion. Peace, a culture of peace that was promoted through the UNESCO. Mindfulness is this example of this report in the UK, Mindful Nation, and the potential of mindfulness in public policies, etc., etc. So basically, this has been my methodology. And from this literature, from this concrete initiative, I was able in this book to propose very concrete policy agendas in many sectors. And I was trying to make sense about, what is there in common, why all these, I would say, values are the foundation of the politics of being. And I come back to what was a vision of the good life in the Western world, according to, for example, Greek philosophers and Plato, which is all about the transcendental, truth, goodness, beauty, for example. And what's very interesting is that later on in history, the Catholic Church has said that these transcendentals are basically framed at the image of God. So they are a reflection of the highest value, the reflection of some divine perfection, let's say. And other philosophers, let's say Hegel, for example, said that freedom was the main quality of the spirit, and development was about, the freedom greater freedom within society was development, basically. So I call them spiritual values because to me, all these values reflect what could be an awakened human being. And why? So these are universal values, and as such, they can provide a common ground for the world unification, or what Leopold Sanger called the civilization of the universal, where all cultures, all countries can offer their best to the world. And that's why at the same time, at the moment in the economic age, we're all pursuing the same kind of matrix with GDP, economic growth. But when it comes to a politics of being, what we mean by being and the good life, every culture has its own cultural understanding of what this means. So they have to define their own version of the politics of being, and based on their own wisdom, which they need to reconnect with. And what's very interesting is that this wisdom, whether you call it, I don't know, Ubuntu, for example, in Southern Africa, or I think it's Kappa in the Philippines, right? They, many of them often, they are rooted often in the story of interbeing and our responsibility towards each other and our community. So why is it so important for societies to reconnect with their culture? Is because, as Engelhardt said, that socio-cultural change is past dependent, and cultural heritage are remarkably enduring. So basically, where you are going as culture depends from where you're coming from. So, and if we want to develop this new development paradigm based on being, and every country needs to reconnect to their own traditional wisdom to chart the way that are culturally relevant for them for this new development. And to do that, I think they also need to recapitulate their own history. There have been a lot of disorientation because of colonization, because of how fast the world is evolving. So I think that's why it's so important to now reconnect with our own culture, understand how we have come to where we are now, and what can be in face of difficulties. It seems logical to us, to come up with a more try to answer, what is a wise, wisdom-based answer to the challenges we are facing. And I believe also countries should perform some kind of collective psychological assessment so that they can reconnect with what they are, with their soul, and rediscover their purpose. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Thomas. It's very interesting about your presentation. I think politics of being, I just see politic of being is, it's the same meaning with the Paul said about non-economic superstructure. Is it? Is it about love, about passion, about spiritual in human being, not longer about the material thing, the politics of being? Is it about that? Correct? Is it correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's about allowing everyone to unfold its full potential as human beings.
And then to define its own version of the good life, is it?
Exactly.
The good life, to define its own version. And I think with the reconnecting with your culture, it is one path or one way to define the good version of a good life, is it, for the society. And very interesting that you saw about unity in diversity, because it is exactly our motto of our nation, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. So I think this is very true, not only for our nation, but for many people in the world. The cultural diversity, and the politics of being is the bridges also to become a cultural age, like Paul said about the non-economic superstructure, and we have to become politic of being. Thank you, Professor Thomas, for your enlightenment. And then, yeah.
Thank you, Mira. My pleasure.
Okay. We continue our presentation to the next. We go to India. Professor Rana Pebesing. Hello, Professor. Good evening, Professor. Yeah,
I have to use my screen.
Okay. Wait a moment, Professor. I will introduce you first. Okay. Okay. The Professor Rana presentation will be cultural and regional dimension of Professor Rana. Rana Pebesing is the president Reconnecting with Your Culture Asia, and President Akla was professor of cultural landscape and heritage studies and head of Department of Geography, Banarana's Hindu University, India. He is an expert and voting member, ICOMOS International Scientific Committee, Places of Religions and Ritual, Prairie Cool, contributing member, ICOMOS IBLA, Cultural Landscape for last over 45 years. He is researching in the fields of cultural landscape, sacred scapes and pilgrim studies, heritage site and planning. For the last some years, he is collaborating with Professor Olympia Niglio, this is very interesting, on the project related to cultural heritage, spiritual awakening, reconnecting with your culture, and enlightened and deep-rooted education. Please welcome Professor Rana Pebesing from India. Please, sir, the stage is yours now.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, of course, I can see your screen. Yes.
It is visible. It is visible, okay?
Yes.
It's okay. Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Scroll down, then where is full focus? Okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to again be reunited with the whole team of our RWYC, and especially Mira, who is the bridge making among all these different types of groups, etc. Okay, and so I have nothing to say anything new, because the three great and grand masters already narrated the whole story. Paul, then Berlin, then Lagarde. So already they have just made the path. So I have to little bit walk and little bit share my, not my, but their feeling through me. So it is nothing like you can say anything new I am going to talk about. Okay. So let me start with, it is like this. So just following the idea that one, what already Paul said, that you can say from whole to wholeness, what we say that it is a human consciousness to super consciousness linking with the whole cosmic realm. So how to define culture is a culture, or you can say culture is cultures. It is something all together. It may be from literature, it may be literature, and something like this. So we have a lot of debate in the ancient past. It started from Cromer and Taylor, what I already mentioned by Paul. So just citing his own perspective. Let me just changing this. Okay, let us realize this world in which culture is the central organizing principle of human civilization, and spirituality is the driving force. So this way you can find the link between Paul and Lagarde. A link like this. And in between, the bridge was made by Vernon to the General Declaration. So altogether, if we can put like this, then we can say that cultural preservation and transference will be key to real global citizenship, cosmic understanding. The basic problem is that somehow there is a little bit gap, we feel like this, of the deeper understanding. It's a deeper understanding, really like this. This idea has already been, the whole concept of sustainability debate started long back. That was 1987 by that Grow-Harlan vulnerability report, that there are three pillars and in between is sustainable. But that concept had been challenged, changed, you can say, in a manner later on in 2015 December. And this has been put like this. So historically, if you can see, later on culture has been added in these three pillars of sustainability. Then at the second stage, culture is interlinking to all the three. It is not like that they are together making something. Without culture, it can't work. And then ultimately, finally, it is reached when these sustainable development goals is started. So that is the covering. All these three, the social, economic, and environment be together. And that's why it is considered that now the culture, this can't be done anyway in practical sense. In Gandhian perspective, we find this has long been already discussed in a different way. You can put the three, society, economy, environment, what basically taken together. And Gandhi already discussed this, I am talking late 30s and 40s. He said that above all, that is the human values. And human values govern the actions of human being. If you are saying the beingness, then in what sense? It is the human values. And that in a deeper sense, when go like the Dalai Lama or what Lagarde said, then we say that is the spiritual sense. Spiritual sense is just like understanding, realizing, awakening, and then sharing with others that deeper sense of understanding. Gandhiji, what said, the father of our nation? He said, S is capital here, self-realization. It is all question of to what extent we are going to realize it. A categories model of civic sense, I just now already mentioned this, that above all we need how to operate this, that is the civic sense. Here are some other people who they have tried their best to, in a different perspective, to explain that idea goes long back. It is nothing like new idea. The problem is that how to implement, how majority of people can realize. So from realization, revelation, and real practice, these are the critical issues. So you can see Alexander von Humboldt in his famous classic Cosmos, Carl Sagan, Cosmos. Then you can say Barry Rogers, Big History Movement. even Bill Gates given $1 billion to that to understand that big history, that we all are linked to the same evolutionary theory, then why to block in a different perspective? You can study different perspective, but link together what you call the unification. And the man, Fritjof Capra, whose famous book, Tao of Physics, what he used to say that there are some countries who, especially through their law, through their practice, through their daily life, they practice, like in the case of Japan, Yosai, that we are living individually inside, but whenever we are working, always working in the society. So he tried to say, to regain our full harmony, we have to regain our experience of interconnectedness in the entire web of life. This reconnecting, religio in Latin, is the very essence of spiritual grounding of what is later on termed by philosopher Ardenas deep ecology. This is said that how to define this in Indian terminology. We say that now the mother earth, the first realization is to think that earth is not a resource, earth is not a planet, earth is just like mother. The sense has to be developed like this, and that is the only dharma. Is the real understanding of man and cosmos relationship. Citing Mahabharata, one of the texts, dharma exists for the welfare of all beings, hence that by which the welfare of all living beings is sustained, that for sure is a real dharma. Again, a revelation on the path of a spiritual quest like deep ecology. That term, little bit we have to know that when we are talking about shallow ecology, what the term introduced by her and us long back, during the 80s, what they used to say that when you are doing everything in the laboratory and then you are predicting that, that is called shadow ecology. But that should be little bit changed like this. And the recent development coming about sustainability, that is close to that one. Be part of the public, be part of the society, be part of the culture, be part of the human being. So that deeper understanding is more important. And that's why in RWYC also, a term when we use, deeply rooted education system. Nothing only that you are teaching or preaching, but we have to have a system which we can awaken the young masses. Okay, in a spiritual and cosmic sense, again, what we say, the recent debate, what is going on under UNESCO, culture interconnectedness, which is the basic philosophy of coexistence, referred in different culture in their own ways. Like already Leonard had indicated that in different culture, how it is like, here is example. Yeah, like when we are talking in Japan, that is called Kyosai. It means we are coexisting. Whatever you say in the nature, we all are interconnected. And if you have something deeper sense, then you can talk to the tree also. This is the way going on in Japan, especially in the countryside, a little bit away you can go from the urban areas anywhere we can experience that one. Harmonic society in China, African humanism, Ubuntu, in South Africa especially, and global family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole globe is our family. It is nothing like you can say a territorial approach that's separate. So somehow we have to understand that for our own political purposes, resource purposes, development purposes, here is a territory. But the moment we can put about the human sense of linkages, we have to think that whole world is a family. They did the same thing already, a little bit explanation given in Vedic thought that goes to 3rd, 4th century AD. That promoting Sarva Bhuta Hita, which means welfare of all beings. If you are real understanding yourself and working on the self, not as individual, but as a particular part of the whole cosmos, and with that feeling you are serving to others, that is the real service. And that is the real way, what we call karma, that action program we have to do like this. So this is another perspective based on the same Dalai Lama prophecy already cited by Leisure. The basic principle of how to follow that nature is our teacher. Generally, what happened, nature we have perceived as just like resource. but that is a spiritual sensitivity. Sustainable living is a community practice. You go to tribal society, I have my own experiences, that would go there and then you find two things are very important. They know all the herbs, plants, soil and dust and water, everything, and they are trying to be linked with this. They communicate with this one. The second thing is anybody is coming, no problem of any language. They always speak, in most of the cases, language of love, facial expression. You can feel it, you can communicate it by different gestures. This way we can say sustainable living. The real world is the optimal learning environment, and that is the cosmic understanding. Ecological literacy is rooted in a deep knowledge of landscape. Every particle of dust on the earth always having something life phenomena. And that thought, what we call the global understanding, that is the basic root to understand that. It is like, you can say, real human awakening. Concerning this RWYC, that is reconnecting with your culture, that program we started 2 years ago. This is a visionary mission of awakening the youth to prepare for the global understanding and environmental conscience, human services, and preserving our cultural heritage in the cosmic frame of nature-culture interfaces through the quality and deeply rooted, what I have already mentioned, deeply rooted education and dialogues. A march reappraising interconnectedness between locality and universality. And that's how in religious tradition, you can say, from holiness to wholeness. This way it can cover the whole cosmic frame. Okay, that has been here is a message from Olympia, basically structured by Olympia. That belief culture will save our common heritage. Let every day we work together, also realize together. Let us follow on, proceed on, march on this sacred path. Let us join hands, helping universal community to realize. Let us have dream with action, vision, and be into action. Let our emotions be awakened through our inner light. Let our culture be a vital force to feel God in all the life form. Let this way awaken humanity to meet with sublime divinity. Said Dalai Lama. This is another perspective that similar ideas are very strongly already emphasized by International Union of Conservation of Nature, where they have two types of a model. They are linked together. So in the first one, left-hand side, you can see it starts from the local knowledge and then it goes to cosmic vision. The natural world directly close by, and then slowly it goes from consciousness to super consciousness, and then what is already referred in the earlier debate, transcendental understanding. So that is very important, that we can not only understand the reality is that the moment we will understand, naturally we will do some action also. This way they try to put the whole idea into a model frame, what call here a natural world, the human world, and then a spiritual world. So interaction altogether, just like we have a 1987 WWT model of sustainable development. Here is a thing that there is a sense of sacred religious sites where mind can communicate with the inherent power of the nature. And that should be at the core, and this will be helpful. Already Japan has used this model for their own planning perspective. Just to come to the close by to say two more ideas. The one is that whenever we are talking at this idea from here, this idea from here, we need synthesis between insider and outside, the Eastern and the Western, interdisciplinary and interdisciplinary, experiential and referential, rational and relational, nature-man reciprocity, and so on, so on. Thus, we would have sustainable, happy, and habitable, humane, spiritual, cultural landscape. Let us hope for the truthfulness through the goodness in the beautiful way what in Sanskrit literature said, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. So this is another, just to give the message when we are trying to interpret this Vitruvian man, Leonardo da Vinci, how this particular, this very important image that makes that from very micro level and then going to the global level. So we have to understand things altogether like this. Think cosmically, see globally, behave regionally, act locally, but inside. This is an appeal for cosmic vision, global humanism, and self-realization. Altogether, it promotes the worldview of indigenous cultural landscape, a spirit of fullness, a sense of holiness, grounded on an evolutionary cosmology, in the core of which human dignities and future vision, a sense of spiritual feeling. So, okay, last one more example just to say then what is the real dharma. So dharma not to be translated only in technical sense of religion, but the sense of his spiritual interconnectedness. It is very close to the word Chinese Tao, the Rita, the cosmic order. An example is like this, that the dharma of water is wetness, the dharma of wind is to breathe, the dharma of honey is sweetness, the dharma of flower is fragrance, the dharma of fire is heat, the dharma of place is to sustain the sacred power manifested therein, the dharma of our culture is to save our mother nature, that is Gaia. This way the whole Gaia theory is also linked together, what he started by Chancellor Overland, still alive. He's 102 years old, but alive. Promoting deeper moral values, the gateway of knowing the cosmic identity of human being, the essence of spiritual understanding. Similar ideas you can say from the Carl Jung, what he expressed in the history of collective as in the history of the individual. Everything depends on the development of consciousness. And that if you can raise that consciousness to a higher state through your spiritual mass, that we can say super consciousness. Here we have already just example, just now we have already discussed what Legard has already explained, that culture and cosmos are interconnected in creating conscience from civilizational continuity in reviving the path. We should reconcile our minds and hearts through spiritual awakening. That is very close to the idea, if you can see a little bit explanation of the word ethics, that make the balance between values and virtue. Ethics stands for empowerment, T for transformation, H holistic approach, I identity, C competence, S sustainability. That idea was developed by Christoph 2020 in his famous book, Global Balance Ethics. So just to say that these all things to be linked in a broad perspective, what the scholars are teachers and masters, in a different perspective, they said we should link together. So this is one of the ideas of this whole program, that how we can reach to that goal. So lastly, we can say that our duty is to make a path. Once the path is stuck out, the means will follow. We know all this, but basic problem we are facing is how to make that path where we all can unite and then proceed to make this world happy, lovely, peaceful, brotherly, like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rana. It's such interesting presentation. I see the diagram about the culture as the foundation for sustainable development, and the arrow indicate the ever-changing dynamics of culture and sustainable development. That's very interesting scheme or picture, I think, about the arrow indicate the ever-changing. And I found out in your presentation also that ever-changing may be transcendental interaction. Is it correct, Professor Rana?
Yes.
The ever-changing, yes. What do you mean about the ever-changing dynamics of culture and sustainable development?
The thing is that change is the law of nature. So naturally, we have to always keep in mind that whatever we are suggesting, just like one example, when you are saying sustainable, what is sustainable? A time frame will come, then that will change. Yes. And that's why Indian metaphysics says there is nothing like that, the best. There is nothing like the worst also. It is constant going on. And that is the mind, that is the human mind that constantly you can see. That's why this whole big history movement people are saying. It is constant changing. It is the only mind.
Changing. Yeah.
And what a very, in a good words, what Legard has already mentioned, all the problems generate from the mind. then solution will come from the mind.
From the mind also.
Okay.
Yeah.
This idea was already raised by Lene White in 1967 in a classical paper published in the journal called Science.
Yes.
And now through ecology and all political thing and being laggard, having the credit to link and elaborate, and now putting even the mystical tradition of spiritualism.
Yes.
So that was great.
Correct.
So
Okay.
I have nothing to add anything. The three master, three loka, three mythical realm, heaven,
Yes.
the earth, and underworld. So we have
Yeah.
Paul, we have Werner, and we have Lagarde. I am somewhere here and there. So thank you very much. And we say in our Hindu literature, pranam, it means bow my head to all these great masters who has enlightened me. And I hope that Meera will
You
make
too.
good path to walk on. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Rana, your presentation and your enlightenment to us. And we continue with the next presentation because the time is ticking. Please, Professor Olympia.
Thank you, Meera. I am very happy because today I personally I learned many things, and I appreciate all presentation. Thank you very much. Now I am very happy to introduce our president, Reconnecting with Your Culture America, Dr. Fabiola Colmenero. And this presentation is in Spanish because our program valorizes all languages in the world. And for this reason, now this presentation will be in Spanish. But I introduce Dr. Fabiola Colmenero in English. Thank you very much. Fabiola Colmenero is the president of America Continent and Mexico National President of International Project Reconnecting with Your Culture. Fabiola is a degree at the University of Guanajuato, Mexico, with a master in City and Sustainability Public Space at ITSEO, a master in Landscape Garden and Public Space at the University of Granada. Architect with degree recognition at the University of Guanajuato, Mexico, and now Fabiola Colmenero is a fellowship at the Universidad Politécnica of Valencia in Spanish. And it is a very pleasure to introduce and to invite Fabiola Colmenero with an interesting presentation. The title of this presentation is Culture, Cosmos, and Cultivating Future, Vision, Reconnecting with Your Culture, and SDGs. Please, muchas gracias, Fabiola, por unirte y por estar con nosotros. Adelante, muchísimas gracias.
Al contrario, muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación a Reconnecting with Your Culture Indonesia. El día de hoy represento al equipo del continente americano, que sin su participación y colaboración de cada uno de ellos no fuera posible el día de hoy estar aquí. De antemano ofrezco una disculpa por las fallas que se está teniendo debido al Zoom y bueno, para ello estará apoyándome mi colega Kevin Echeverry, quien en conjunto tenemos la presidencia del continente americano a través de Reconnecting with Your Culture America. Adelante, Kevin, por favor. Gracias. Bueno, comenzaré diciendo que la cultura es un pilar fundamental para el desarrollo sostenible y que también es el motor de la evolución humana para la aparición y la evolución. ¿Por qué? Porque la cultura desempeñó un papel esencial en nuestra supervivencia y nuestro éxito como especie. Y hoy es un tema que nos compete a todos. A través de la educación de las niñas, niños y jóvenes que comprenden tan importante rol que se juega en todo el mundo y principalmente en el continente americano, nos representa grandes oportunidades en la educación y el aprendizaje a lo largo de toda nuestra vida. Por eso, el Reconnecting with Your Culture América es uno de los principales impulsores para el desarrollo sostenible con el fin de mejorar la calidad de vida de las personas y poder alcanzar estos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Hablamos de un ecosistema cultural que debe incorporar a las nuevas generaciones que ya son parte de este presente, pero que también forman el desarrollo sostenible que nos convoca a un proceso global. Un proceso que tiene que tener en cuenta los límites del planeta, pero también que trabajen desde nuestra herencia y que no sea irreversible para nuestros hijos e hijas. Entonces, entender la cultura como una herramienta para el desarrollo sostenible e inclusivo es impredecible. ¿Por qué? Porque en el contexto global, donde los grandes problemas de la sociedad mundial ha sido acometer pues estas grandes dimensiones culturales e intrínsecas, la cultura puede ayudar a interpretar situaciones difíciles que nos contribuyen con sus elementos a mejorar las condiciones para el tratamiento y la percepción de la cultura. Es por eso que el día de hoy les compartiremos algunas experiencias pedagógicas, culturales e inclusivas en el sistema educativo de América Latina. Reconnecting with Your Culture, a través de todo lo que hemos estado trabajando, esta contribución se fundamenta en los esfuerzos, en las experiencias realizadas a lo largo de todo este año 2021 y parte del 2022, por parte de los diferentes actores de la cooperación y para el desarrollo sostenible, donde aprender a través de estas prácticas y de sus resultados nos permite también tener nuevas líneas de reflexión, y estas líneas de reflexión forman parte de una acción para encontrar el papel de la cultura en el desarrollo sostenible dentro de un contexto cultural. Es por eso que estos retos culturales presentes en todo el mundo son demasiado importantes y tan importantes que no han sido tratados de la misma manera. Por eso, bajo estas tres dimensiones originales del desarrollo sostenible, la economía, la equidad social, el desarrollo medioambiental, y por medio de estos métodos participativos que estamos desarrollando en América Latina a través de estos tres ejes, motivamos y empoderamos a otros para que exijan y utilicen las oportunidades educativas como parte de un bien público. Si bien es de principal recomendación el bien común, el derecho fundamental y base para fundamentar y garantizar que se cumplan otros derechos. De ahí porque la igualdad y el acceso a la consecución de la educación, principalmente entre las niñas, niños y en áreas urbanas y en áreas rurales, es así como las razones de este acceso a la educación forma un acceso equitativo, en igualdad de las oportunidades, la educación de calidad, y es a través que Reconnecting with Your Culture alcanza el rol de la cultura para la sostenibilidad, aprendiendo a tres ejes fundamentales en el continente americano que nos ayuda a crear un mundo más sostenible, equitativo y pacífico. Se está trabajando principalmente en tres ejes. Uno de ellos es las culturas locales, la educación y las culturas locales. El eje número 2, que tiene que ver con la parte de accesibilidad e inclusión. Y el eje número 3, que hace referencia a la sustentabilidad. Entonces, en temas de educación se realiza a través del método pedagógico Reconnecting with Your Culture, donde nos propusimos a nivel internacional alcanzar y asegurar una escuela gratuita, equitativa y de calidad desde preescolar hasta secundaria, asegurando también un gran trabajo entre todos los comités nacionales que conforman el continente americano para la cooperación internacional y la cultura que forma parte de esta formación. Es por eso que cada uno de los ejes que hemos mostrado hace un momento se trabaja en comunidad con las personas, donde se trata de implementar las políticas públicas en materia de plan de desarrollo, pero también contribuimos a la formación de docentes, servidores públicos y al alumnado en temas de cultura y de patrimonio. Es impredecible incluir a todas y todos en este tipo de grupos artísticos y a las poblaciones que no solo favorezcan a unos en particular, sino también que todos seamos capaces de fortalecer estos derechos humanos, reconociendo el objetivo fundamental como lo es la parte de la gobernanza en la construcción de una sociedad más sana, más segura, más tolerante, pero también más creativa. Es decir, implica que los gobiernos locales se fomenten desde un modelo de desarrollo y que contemple las necesidades del presente sin poner en peligro a las nuevas generaciones. El aplicar estas políticas públicas, como lo vemos en este gran trabajo de los 3 ejes, es en realidad cómo se fundamentan y cómo se constituyen. A través de los 3 ejes de las denominadas culturas locales, se fortalece también en las escuelas de educación básica y en las escuelas de educación universitaria. Por ejemplo, la Escuela Primaria Ignacio Allende se está trabajando un nuevo modelo de educación a través de la innovación de cómo involucrar a los niños a la presentación de nuevas expectativas, pero también que conozcan más acerca de la historia. La siguiente, por favor. Y a partir de ello, identificamos en todo el continente, estamos trabajando sobre el diseño de los, donde es imprescindible preservar, revitalizar, pero también proteger. De ahí porque el objetivo es garantizar que el derecho de los pueblos indígenas, también conocido como las partes de las culturas originarias, integren aspectos de esa diversidad lingüística y multilingüismo que nos proporcionen una oportunidad para tomar medidas necesarias y que puedan ser incluidos también. La siguiente. Y a partir de ello se han desarrollado distintos talleres, como lo fue ese taller que se desarrolló en Venezuela, en la elaboración de las muñecas, de cómo a través de la antropología, de la historia y el apoyo de ciertas alcaldías, como lo es el municipio de Sucre, y a través de la Fundación José Ángel Llamas, de la División de Historia Regional, se realizó este taller sobre las culturas locales, sobre el tallado de las figurillas, pero también sobre los bailes tradicionales y la parte del patrimonio inmaterial. La siguiente, por favor. Y es a partir también que no solamente involucramos la educación básica, sino también la educación de carácter universitario a través de la Universidad Santa Fe, como lo es el proyecto dual. El que nosotros pudiéramos reconocer directamente la educación de toda la parte universitaria para reconocer los 68 pueblos originarios, que tenemos en el continente americano, en el país de México. De ahí porque el Plan de Acción Mundial para el Diseño Internacional de las Lenguas Indígenas, el DIL, desempeña un papel fundamental para que las personas en el planeta se junten con esa parte de la biodiversidad y en condición. Es por eso que en todo el continente americano estamos trabajando en un ejercicio piloto, como lo es en Argentina, en Brasil, en Chile, pero también tiene que ver con la parte en Colombia, en Ecuador, en Paraguay y Venezuela. ¿Por qué? Porque la riqueza cultural no solamente en México es sorprendente, sino todo el continente debe de tener la existencia de nuestros pueblos originarios y saber también cuántos son y cómo se desarrolla cada uno de ellos. La siguiente, por favor. Por otra parte, el poder generar todos estos supuestos del diseño, nos sometimos a 4 acciones principales, que es la sensibilizar la importancia que tiene la diversidad lingüística y el multilingüismo, pero también que se obtenga el reconocimiento a través de la utilización de las lenguas en todos los niveles, pero que también concibamos la integración y la incorporación de estas lenguas a través de la prestación de apoyos, ya sea a través de infraestructuras o de recursos financieros, para lo cual es necesario contar con la capacidad de los recursos de las y los interesados para poder generar este plan de acción mundial para la promoción de las lenguas. La siguiente, por favor. Es ahí que parte de esta estrategia de la comunicación global va a servir a los siguientes fines, tanto a sensibilizar, a transmitir, a contribuir, pero también a comprometer e implicar y conectar y movilizar y alentar a la cooperación internacional para crear ciertas alianzas. La siguiente, por favor. Entonces, como decíamos, la nueva forma de hacer innovación a través de la educación se está trabajando desde el decenio con la maestra Amelia Flores en la Escuela Ignacio Allende a través de una obra de teatro. donde los niños y niñas conocen a través de sus ancestros y una obra de teatro denominada Lugar donde los hombres se hacen dioses, representando a la cultura teotihuacana, que próximamente les compartiremos esta obra de teatro con la que estamos trabajando a través de los niños. La siguiente, por favor. Entonces, dentro de cada uno de estos desarrollos tenemos nuestro eje número 2, que habla de la inclusión y la accesibilidad del método pedagógico de Reconnecting with Your Culture, que tiene que ver a la reducción de las desigualdades. Reducción de las desigualdades, un proyecto que se alberga en la Universidad de Concepción en Chile, que justo hace referencia a la inclusión y a la accesibilidad para hacer esa reducción. La siguiente, por favor. Y todo enfocado a la parte de las culturas locales, la importancia del diseño y la accesibilidad universal para lograr una participación plena, efectiva, pero también que tenga una inclusión de las personas independientemente de su contexto social, educacional o discapacidad, incluyendo las condiciones económicas, la edad, la etnia, para generar un grupo de trabajo de manera interdisciplinario a través del respeto valórico, pero también de la sensibilización humana. Entonces, dentro de estas actividades del eje número 2 que estamos trabajando en el continente americano, hablamos de la llamada Escuela del Mundo, donde buscamos la equidad a través de las competencias culturales y de la integración social y cultural que se desarrolla en todo el continente, desde la formación docente, como lo podemos observar aquí. Creo que tenemos que empezar por los profesores, porque la formación es una formación de manera integral, no solamente es el trabajo con los niños, sino también el trabajo desde la parte docente y luego también cómo la desarrollamos al interior de cada uno de ellos. Otro de los grandes trabajos a través de la reducción de las desigualdades se trabaja con la Escuela Gregorio Torres Quintero, donde se encuentran pues niños en situaciones de vulnerabilidad, pero que también el aporte social que se tiene de cada uno de los profesores y las profesoras que están aquí presentes, ese gran compromiso social a través del desarrollo de las nuevas actividades y de cómo también se incluye en este programa en todos los contextos sociales. La siguiente, por favor. Ok, con respecto a esto, voy ya para concluir, en el eje número 3, en la sustentabilidad del proyecto Reconnecting with Your Culture América, hablamos desde una gran línea que tiene que ver el desarrollo, el trabajo con las personas, la educación, el urbanismo, pero también la propia naturaleza. A partir de ello, ¿cómo lo estamos desarrollando? Bueno, a partir de ello se desarrollan también ciertas actividades que tienen que ver con el desarrollo de la propuesta de parte de esta cultura, que significa la protección, la urbanización inclusiva y sostenible desde un patrimonio cultural, incluyendo también de manera considerable el patrimonio natural, que se está desarrollando a partir de las ciudades inclusivas denominadas ciudades 880 en el desarrollo de los espacios públicos. La siguiente, por favor. Y ya por último, los ejes y el patrimonio natural con el que se está trabajando en Colombia a partir del conservatorio, donde se hicieron ciertas actividades considerando el patrimonio de la ciudad y la relación que tiene con la naturaleza, y así socializando este tipo de pinturas realizadas con los niños y las niñas a partir de los materiales aquí presentados. Es por eso que la parte natural se integra desde la adaptación al cambio climático, las ciudades y las comunidades inclusivas, como pueden verse a continuación. La siguiente, por favor. Como pueden verse a través del proyecto Travesía Calamarí, que se alberga en la Universidad Jorge Tadeo Lozano, seccional del Caribe, donde invitan a las niñas y niños a disfrutar de una espectacular aventura, una aventura que te lleva por la parte natural. La siguiente, por favor. Y a través de esta parte cultural se identifica la parte tangible, la parte material, la parte intangible también a través del desarrollo de cada uno de estos proyectos. La siguiente. Entonces, dentro de esta gran travesía de Calamarí, se invita a hacer no solamente captar lo que vemos en la ciudad, sino también la flora, la fauna dentro de cada uno de los recorridos y cómo lo podemos involucrar a través también del patrimonio inmaterial, como lo es la cultura, las tradiciones, la comida tradicional. En México se trabajó en Guadalajara, México, justo con el paisaje que se puede observar en las barrancas de Huentitán. La siguiente, por favor. Y bueno, esto es un breve collage de todas las actividades a manera de resumen de cómo se ha trabajado no solamente en el patrimonio, sino también de cómo construimos ciudad a través del diseño participativo de la acción de una ciudad diseñada por las niñas y niños, los encuentros de fotografía, tardes de inclusión, los desarrollos de diferentes actividades, incluyendo patrimonios naturales, inmateriales, de todo el continente, como lo fue también en Chile, Colombia, Argentina, México. La siguiente, por favor. Y bueno, todas estas actividades nos han llevado también a grandes exposiciones y un gran trabajo que se desarrolla a través de nuestra página web, Reconnecting with Your Culture América, a través de las culturas locales. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Fabiola. Muchísimas gracias por tu presentación. Estamos muy agradecidos por todos los proyectos que se están desarrollando en América Latina. Thank you very much, Fabiola Colmenero. Thank you very much. Very interesting all project active in Latin America now. And we are very proud of you for all opportunity from Latin America. Thank you so much. And now we continue our seminar with the last presentation from Fatima Zahra Salih from Mexico. Fatima?
Oui, I'm here.
Okay, bonjour, bonjour Fatima.
Bonjour.
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 Good afternoon.
Bonjour Pierre, bonjour tout le monde. I'm very glad to be with you now. So I understand what you did, what you say, but my presentation will be in French. I'm sorry for that.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Because, it is a pleasure, sorry, because for us it is very important to valorize all languages in the world.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
And now I introduced you. The title of the presentation is Le patrimoine à l'école, quelle méthode et quel impact. Fatima?
Oui, alors je vais essayer de partager mon écran.
No, one moment, please. Fatima, it's please the presentation of Fatima. Okay, thank you very much. Fatima Zahra Salih is President Reconnecting with Your Culture Morocco and the President Africa in Francophone territory. She is a teacher, research at Sultan Moulay Slimane Morocco University. She is coordinator of Master Studies on Tangible and Intangible Heritage and the vice-president of Research Laboratory Narration and the Cultural Forms, Literature, Languages and Society. Founding director of the Festival International to Comte between 2002 and 2012, she works on the field of collection of folk tales and legends. She is currently working on the heritization of the Amazigh Whistled languages in the Morocco Atlas. Member of the scientific committee of the We Speak Citizen Foundation and the Italian journal Culture Digitali. Thank you very much. Please, Fatima. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Je voudrais partager mon...
Nous sommes heureux de votre présence. Veuillez commencer votre présentation.
Oui, est-ce que vous voyez mon écran? Vous le voyez?
Oh, yes. Oui.
Oui, d'accord. Très bien. Alors, le terme culture se trouve au cœur de notre rencontre, qui se trouve d'ailleurs au cœur de notre rencontre est suffisamment polysémique pour nous obliger à nous y arrêter. Il désigne à la fois les us, les coutumes et différentes pratiques, ainsi que les croyances d'une communauté, comme il renvoie à l'art dans ses différentes formes. Elle, c'est-à-dire la culture, elle renvoie essentiellement à ce que l'homme, l'humanité, enfin l'homme dans le sens de humain, développe et apporte avec ou à la nature. Le premier sens renvoie à un aspect collectif, commun, au moment où le second est individuel, quoi qu'il puisse, à travers ses productions, œuvres artistiques, devenir collectif, emblématique même de la communauté d'où il émerge et qui se l'approprie. Beaucoup d'œuvres d'art relèvent d'ailleurs de l'identité nationale et y réfèrent, ou plutôt y réfèrent, sans équivoque aucune. Il suffit de voir la Joconde pour penser à l'Italie, de voir Déjeuner sur l'herbe pour penser à la France, les frères Karamazov pour penser à la Russie, Aïda pour penser à l'Italie, encore une fois, Keltoum pour penser à l'Égypte et au monde arabe, à penser à Fayrouz pour penser au Liban et au monde arabe. Mais le terme culture, ainsi, il oscille entre deux désignations aux caractéristiques distinctes, quoi qu'elles puissent se joindre, ou plutôt se rejoindre, pour certains cas. Par ailleurs, le premier sens du mot « culture » est naturellement synonyme d'une pluralité culturelle, puisque chaque communauté jouit d'une culture propre, laquelle pluralité n'est pas toujours conçue comme une richesse, mais plutôt comme une disparité basée sur des jugements de valeur, classant des cultures comme supérieures et d'autres comme inférieures. Or, aucune identité culturelle ne peut se concevoir sans l'altérité. Pourtant, au lieu de dialogue, des conflits naissent et par conséquent, toutes sortes de violences. Le choc des civilisations de Huntington a versé dans ce sens malheureusement, sans pour autant chercher à y trouver des remèdes. On a vu un peu les conséquences. Or, il est évident que le monde a besoin d'une pensée construite sur des valeurs humaines et qui investit cette diversité et en fait une force, alliant tolérance, vivre ensemble, solidarité, paix. L'ancrage de chaque culture dans son environnement expliquerait la grande disparité, ou plutôt la grande diversité, que l'on peut constater à l'œil nu. D'où l'importance de la relation entre les deux, c'est-à-dire la culture et l'environnement. De même qu'un maintien de la dite relation, c'est-à-dire entre les deux. Chez Ikhwan Safa, qui était un cercle de philosophes secrets, ayant vécu au IVe siècle de l'Hégire, à Bassora, en Irak, on voit en détail la chaîne des relations entre les différents êtres vivants et la nature. Les philosophes irakiens, à l'époque, ça ne s'appelait pas l'Irak, ça s'appelait autrement. Et ils écrivaient « L'homme est la dernière des créatures après l'animal et les plantes, car ils sont sa source de vie. L'animal fut créé après la plante, car cette dernière est sa source de vie. Et la plante fut créée après les minéraux, car ils sont sa source de vie. Et les minéraux ont apparu après l'eau, qui est la cause de sa formation. » Fin de citation. Et cette citation, elle date de plusieurs siècles, de l'époque abbasside. Cette relation d'interdépendance ou de causalité met en évidence la chaîne de l'écosystème auquel nous appartenons. Elle sous-entendait indirectement aussi que toute défaillance entraînerait son dérèglement. D'où le besoin d'une approche globale qui accorderait à chaque élément la place qui lui revient et l'importance dont il est digne. À titre d'exemple, et pour citer les mêmes écrivains, enfin les mêmes auteurs, les Ikhwan Safa ont publié un texte qui s'appelle Plaidoyer pour l'animal, ou plutôt Plaidoyer de l'animal contre l'humain ou contre l'homme, dont la teneur écologiste avant-gardiste est flagrante. C'était déjà un ouvrage qui défendait la situation de l'animal face à l'homme, mais pas uniquement, en fait, c'est la nature elle-même, c'est toute la nature, c'est la globalité de la nature face à l'homme qui se plaint du dérèglement, justement, et de l'abus, des différents abus. Je dois dire que ces philosophes étaient avant-gardistes, et aujourd'hui encore, on peut se référer à eux. Aujourd'hui, nous avons besoin de nous ressourcer des sagesses diverses pour agir en faveur d'un monde meilleur. Comment la culture peut-elle être investie en tant que clé pour le changement systémique et en tant que levier de développement durable dans un monde multi-identitaire? Dans les années 70, Michel de Certeau défendait la culture pour tous et défendait en France, Michel de Certeau, qui est un écrivain, enfin un chercheur, un grand chercheur des années 70, il défendait la culture pour tous et défendait la culture populaire. Il proposait à l'université de devenir, je cite, un laboratoire qui produise une culture de masse en proportionnant des méthodes à des questions et à des besoins. Fin de citation. Aujourd'hui, ces questions sont toujours au cœur des préoccupations ou de nos préoccupations. La démocratisation de la culture, dite populaire, ou plutôt de la culture, pardon, et la réhabilitation d'une culture dite populaire sont d'actualité. En la revalorisant par le biais du patrimoine culturel et en la mettant au centre des projets de développement durable, c'est d'abord l'humain qui est valorisé dans son identité culturelle et son appartenance. Et ce, sans jugement de valeur, qui là aussi considérait la culture dite savante supérieure à la culture populaire. Se débarrasser de ces préjugés que certaines institutions, y compris les universités, pour ne pas dire surtout les universités, ont longtemps abrité, est un premier pas vers le chemin du développement. Ceci dit, les efforts des chercheurs anthropologues ou autres sont considérables, en œuvrant pour qu'un regard neuf et dénué de jugement soit porté sur la culture populaire. Les multiples efforts fournis par l'UNESCO dans le sens de la sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel, avec la mise en place de la Convention du PCI de 2003, elle a ouvert la voie à la culture populaire pour être reconnue et vue autrement. Ce que le projet Reconnecting with Your Culture propose depuis son lancement, c'est de jeter un pont entre les deux désignations de la culture, et ce, en mettant en œuvre des actions artistiques construites autour de l'héritage culturel. L'expérience entamée depuis un an jouit d'un grand succès auprès des éducateurs, au Maroc comme en Tunisie comme ailleurs. Leur engagement bénévole, c'est-à-dire celui des éducateurs, est simplement remarquable, voire admirable. S'il est aujourd'hui difficile de prévoir les résultats de ces actions sur une longue durée, sur notre humanité et notre planète, il serait quasiment certain que les graines semées aujourd'hui donneront des fruits dans l'avenir. Pourtant, le questionnement devrait être permanent sur les méthodes pédagogiques à réviser, les moyens à mettre en place afin d'améliorer nos actions et obtenir de meilleurs résultats. Notre créativité, inventivité, sens d'échange et de partage nous serait d'un grand apport pour une action polyvalente et pluriel. Beaucoup de ce qui a été dit et proposé par les professeurs intervenants aujourd'hui lors de notre webinaire pourrait nous inspirer pour évoluer. J'aimerais conclure avec une citation d'Edgar Morin, un sociologue de renom, un homme qui a traversé le siècle, il a 100 ans aujourd'hui. Être humaniste, c'est aussi ressentir au plus profond de soi que chacun d'entre nous est un moment éphémère d'une extraordinaire aventure, l'aventure de la vie qui a donné naissance à l'aventure humaine. Que cet humanisme-là ne nous quitte jamais. Et sur ce, je termine ma communication. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Merci Fatima, merci beaucoup. Vos observations sur l'importance de la culture à suite de l'expérience populaire sont essentielles pour bâtir un avenir meilleur. La culture populaire, c'est la culture vivante, living heritage, et nous devons travailler ensemble sur ce concept très important pour nous. Et vos suggestions sont également essentielles pour améliorer notre projet Reconnecting with Your Culture. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you so much, Fatima. I am very proud of you. And all members in Reconnecting with Your Culture appreciate very much all projects from Morocco, from Tunisia, from all countries in Africa. Thank you so much.
Merci.
And now I left the time at my friend Mira. Mira, the audio.
Thank you. All the panelists has finished their presentation. Each of them is provide and show the new knowledge for us. But there is interconnection between one and another. That's about culture. This is the uniqueness about culture. We are different, but we are actually the same feeling, the same sense of feeling about culture. Maybe different form, maybe different attitude or different, but the feel, the moral, I think it's really the same. So there is no difference between us, from Africa to Europe, Asia, and then Canada, also America. I think this is the greatness of this dialogue. So we see our similarities, but in a different way, but we still similar. We are human being. I think this is very wonderful seminar, and then wonderful meeting about culture. Now we move forward to next agenda is a question and answer from the audience or from the other panelists. If the other panelists also have the question to the other, and then we have a time to make a Q&A section now. Please chat the question on the chat room, and then me or Olympia will be asked to the panelists that you will be addressing.
I wanted to thanks Fabiola Colmenero, because before it is impossible for me to conclude the presentation from Fabiola
that's okay.
Colmenero, because all projects that are active in Latin America now introduce an important topic about the relationship between culture and ancestral tradition.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, this is very interesting also to share and also to know very well this different approach about the culture, because now for us it is also very important to understand the different means, no, of
Yes.
these words in the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And I consider now very interesting this experience in Latin America to valorize the ancestral traditions, because in the last few years this history was abandoned, and now, thanks also reconnecting with your culture, we valorize again these ancient traditions. And for this reason, I thanks very much Fabiola Colmenero that in this period manages all these projects in Latin America. Thank you, Fabiola. Thank you very much. But all staff, all American staff, thank you very much. And I want to invite Paul,
please.
For
yes, Paul.
A comment about this whole presentation.
Yes, please.
Paul, please. It is very interesting for us to know your suggestion about all presentation that we have learned today.
Well, thank you very much, and I feel honored to make some initial comments about the real success of this seminar today and the particular topic of the seminar, which is so important in the world today and important to so many organizations. For a long time, I think the big problem in the cultural field was that there were many different definitions of culture, and that people in different cultural areas had their own particular definitions. And this created an enormous complication in the world, as we all know, because as soon as you started talking about culture, everybody said that, well, what do you mean by culture, and how do you define culture? And we know that two American scholars 50 years ago wrote a whole book on this, and they indicated there were something like 150 different uses and definitions of culture in the world at that time. I think what's happened in the last 50 or 60 years is that we are rapidly eliminating this problem of the great confusion and complexity about culture, because we're coming down to two specific areas that constitute culture, and one is ingrained in the other. Now that we're talking about culture in much larger and more expansive holistic terms, and more people are settling on that, I think it's becoming increasingly clear in the world, because of problems that have gone on in the last 10 or 15 years, that the most appropriate way to define culture now at present and going forward in the future is that culture is the whole, or it's the total way of life of people. And the great advantage of that, as we know, is that it's a holistic rather than partial view of culture. And we've seen in the presentations that were given today that there are so many variations on all that, but basically we're all drawn to this idea that if we need and want real systemic change in the world, we have to focus our attention on the holistic or all-encompassing view of culture. What has also gone on, which I think is very important, is that we're beginning to understand that the more traditional ways of defining culture that lasted for centuries and centuries, the arts, the humanities, the heritage of history, and more recently, as we know, the cultural industries and various sports and recreational activities are now being seen and understood as the gateways, the keys that are necessary to open up our understanding of the broader, holistic, and all-encompassing nature of culture and cultures, because they're so big that we can't see them. They're very difficult to understand. And so we need symbols in certain areas that provide us with the means to get in behind what culture and cultures mean in the holistic sense. And I think where this is a very important part of culture. I have one other comment before I come more specifically to your question, and that is that this question of ages. Most people, I think in ages in terms of centuries, but some people use it in terms of decades or maybe a particular century. But in the past, we've always named ages, in most cases, after the fact. It's happened, and then we've looked back, and some scholar has said, well, that was really a renaissance. And then that term, because it captured what was going on at that period of time in history, became the term to explain what was going on in that period, as if it was a consequence of change rather than a cause of change. Then we had the Enlightenment, and it wasn't called the Enlightenment at the time. If you read into that matter of defining the Enlightenment as an age, some scholar called it the Enlightened Age about 150 years after the age actually happened. So there's another case of where we're seeing culture as a consequence and not a cause of change. I think what's going on in the world now, and I don't know whether you'd agree with this, is that we're beginning to see that now culture can be a cause of change rather than a consequence of change. And indeed, it has to be a cause rather than a consequence, because the only way we're going to address the terrible problems that exist in the world in terms of the devastating effect on the natural environment, in terms of the unequal distributions of wealth, the difficulty to understand people from different cultures, values, ways of life, and so on, is to see that we now need to treat culture as the cause, and we need to be very culturally conscious about the need to move into a cultural age in the future. And I think there's a very strong case that can be made for the next age being a cultural age if we cling to the holistic and all-encompassing view of culture in general and cultures in particular. What's made this seminar so valuable, in my view, is that there are so many dimensions. It's like picking up a diamond, and it shines brightly in many different directions simultaneously. There's so many different experiences that are happening in the cultural field today in so many different parts of the world. And one of the most important of these developments, I think, because when we treat culture as a whole, it concerns all people, all countries, all organizations, and not just some people, some countries,
Yes.
some organizations. As was said earlier today, it's culture from the bottom up, no longer so much culture from the top down, from the elites and the established groups filtering down through highly developed art forms and so on to people in other classes and other areas of life. Now it's coming up from the bottom through the enormous creativity that's being expressed in all different parts of the world today, coming from people with all different sorts of genders, all different sorts of colors, all different sorts of values, worldviews. And it's very, very exciting. I mean, I'm living in a country now when there are enormous expressions coming from Black Canadians in Canada, the Indigenous Canadians, people from many minority, marginalized, and oppressed groups. And they're seeping very quickly into all the vehicles of communication. So you're learning about these things in newspapers now, on television programs, in podcasts, and so on. So this is going on, that there is fermenting in the world a great interest and involvement in very many different cultural circumstances. We've shared, fortunately, just a small inkling of what this is ultimately like if you think about it in global terms. And I think by the various contributions that have made to the presenters in this seminar, the doors have been opened now on a very rich dialogue and discussion about where we go from here, how cultures are so important, and why with determination we might really be able to enter a cultural age in the future, an age that would go on for the next great period of history, and not just because culture is a topical term today.
It's inevitable.
Thank you, Paul. The culture will save our common house.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and thank you all for the very valuable contributions that were made to the discussions here today at this great international Reconnecting with Your Culture seminar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
A great pleasure to continue our path with you, Paul. Thank you.
And me too.
Thank you. Thank you also, Thomas. A great pleasure for me to meet you today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure, thanks.
We had a great opportunity to do this. And what great presentations and different languages and different participants from different parts of the world.
Exactly.
It's a very, very exciting experience.
Thank you.
Are there other questions that people might want to put to the presenters?
There are any questions? Or I invite Mira to conclude this international seminar. Thank you very much.
Okay. The last one is a conclusion from Fatima, please. Okay. Now because there is no question from the participant or from the fellow panelists, and now we conclude because the time also is have been 2.5 hours. It's okay. The conclusion will be shown by slide by our Zoom operator. Please.
Sadly, I must say it's time to say goodbye. But
not yet. Not
only
yet.
The beginning.
We conclude first all the presentation, just small, and then maybe from here we can discuss a little bit more longer. Yeah, this is that we conclude about the first presentation from Paul Staver. Economic aid is not even close to as a whole, but culture is. Is it correct, the conclusion, Paul?
It is. Very correct. Right on, as they say.
It's not even close, the economic. Okay, next, Mas Bram. Next English, yeah. This is from Professor Ben Overland. A true bottom-up strategy involves a change. So I think the Jena Declaration, the reconnecting with your culture, is a bottom-up strategy and bottom-up movement, the real bottom-up. This is and no longer top to bottom right, Olympia. We should make a movement together.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, Professor Ben always left because he is have another meeting. Next,
yes.
Next conclusion, please. Yeah, this is from Professor Thomas. Politics of being is nothing but to define people's own version of the good life, and nothing but culture is path toward in defining people's own version. And it is the implementation of non-economic superstructure as presented by Paul. Is it correct, Professor Thomas, this conclusion? You can add on.
Yes, so yes.
Yeah. This is what we construe from his presentation, extraordinary presentation. Next from Dr. Fabiola. Oh no, Professor Rana. Professor Rana, culture as foundation of sustainable development creates ever-changing dynamics of culture. And this is very interesting because culture and sustainable development, allowing transcendental interaction in conservation. So not only harmony and everything, but allowing the people have a transcendental interaction. This is, I think, the most unseen, the unseen power above culture, the transcendental interaction in conservation. This
Exactly.
is, yes, yes. Next, Fabiola, from Dr. Fabiola. This is also interesting that we know the word of culture, which is in Latin America, connected to ancestral tradition, like Professor Olympia said previously, and then now the movement to back to their own roots of culture. It's great, and then maybe young generation will be back to their own root rather than to the fast modernization, right, Dr. Fabiola? Sí.
Exactly. This is
Exactly.
the good
Hola, sí, es
conclusion.
correcto. Yo creo que es esencial hablar de la parte de la cultura ancestral porque forma parte del presente y también la gran contribución hacia el futuro. Entonces, el gran trabajo que se debe de hacer desde las personas y hacia los demás nos contribuye a una mejor formación.
The culture is in dialogue with the people, with the community, and it is is correct to start from this concept of ancestral culture to understand very well the significance, the meaning of the culture in Latin America. Thank you very much.
Yes, very, very, very insightful. Professor Olympia, maybe the last one from Fatima. You can make a short conclusion about it.
Oh, yes.
Presentation. No, just saying to all of us.
Fatima,
because
please, last comments from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.
Un dernier, vous voulez un dernier, oui, vous voulez un dernier mot sur ce qui a été dit?
Yes. Oui.
Oui, alors en fait, je me suis rendu compte que, comme disait tout à l'heure Anna, c'est que il y a une interconnexion entre la plupart des interventions qui ont été faites et du fait que nous portons les mêmes valeurs, celle de l'humanisme d'abord et celle de la valeur, les valeurs aussi de la pluralité culturelle et le respect vis-à-vis d'autrui et des spécificités culturelles. Donc, je pense que je crois que c'est la conclusion qu'on pourrait faire, comme disait le docteur Schaffer, c'est qu'il y a une ère culturelle qui devrait finalement prendre le dessus sur l'ère économique et que nous devons d'abord, et comme disait aussi l'intervenant Monsieur Legrand, c'est qu'il y a aussi une politique du bien-être, en fait, mais une politique qui axerait on va dire, qui axerait son intérêt sur la personne et non pas sur les systèmes économiques ou autres. Et donc, l'humain devrait être la priorité de toutes nos actions, en fait. Je crois que c'est une conclusion que je pourrais, moi, personnellement, de mon point de vue, et d'après ce que j'ai entendu des différents intervenants. Voilà, c'est que la priorité est à l'être, d'abord, à l'être humain, avant tout autre intérêt. Et merci.
Merci.
Merci,
c'est moi.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Merci.
Now I consider that today we learned many important words, no? In every presentation from culture, community, transcultural dimension, no? Intercultural dialogue, responsibility, community, participation, sustainability, development, freedom, ecology, spirituality, happiness, peace, ethics, justice, etc., etc. And all very important words for everyone to continue our program, our work in the world. And let's meet thanks every international committees and every national committees reconnecting with your culture in the world for this important commitment in our path. And thank you very much, all staff in Indonesia, for your time, for your support, and I thanks all very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is yeah. With this conclusion, I think we are here to examine the crucial role of culture, and with that conclusion that we in the slide, creating systemic change, sustainable development that are required to chart a new course for humanity and the world in the future. So insight from all the panelists, we hopefully that we will move forward, not just only conclusion, but we move forward with the implementation and with the application to make the real systemic change by culture. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone, and we will closing by our host will closing our seminar. Please, Bening, you close the seminar.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mira. Such incredible discussions that we have today. We hope our seminar can contribute to better implementation of cultural policies in creating systemic change and sustainable development that are required to chart a new course for humanity and the world in the future. Thank you to the moderator, all panelists representing 4 continents, and to all audiences from all over the globe for attending this seminar. For anyone who is interested to see the video of this seminar, this video will be published on RWYC International YouTube channel and Chakra Cultural Foundation YouTube channel. As closing statement, I will be quote Valerie Lynch Lee Words, editor of Faces of Culture. The future of humanity is one and the same with the future of culture. For culture is the chief means by which we adapt to our environment. Until we meet again in another event. Salam budaya. Namaste.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Everyone.